Hello, everybody. My name is Ryan Koki, and welcome to the Seahawk Recap Show, and welcome to my predictions for Super Bowl 58. And yeah, with the playoffs right around the corner tomorrow, I thought I would just put out my predictions. And I got two predictions for you guys in this video. It's how I think the actual Super Bowl playoffs will play out this season, and how I want them to play out this season with a bunch of different storylines and unrealistic expectations. But that's what prediction videos are for, really. It's really hard to predict this season who's going to do well in these playoffs because anything can happen in the playoffs. But before we get into the video itself, I would highly recommend leaving a like on this video if you enjoy it so that I know I'm doing a very good job. And if you would like to see any more future content from me like this off season, which I will be having more content down the line, I would highly recommend subscribing to the channel. Anyways, let's get into the video before I ramble on way too much. And let's get into the predictions. So, how I think the playoffs will actually go. And in this scenario, I'm looking at the wild card, which I will be recapping, by the way, for everybody that's curious. Come back to the channel as I will have the wild card weekend recaps and uh, all throughout the playoffs. So that'll be a very interesting time. But for this wild card, let's start off with the first matchup. It is the Browns versus the Texans. Although the Texans have done very well this season, no one expected them to be here. This could be an upset match, but I'm looking at the Browns. I'm looking at the Browns at the fifth seed. And the way they have gone through this season, no one expected them to be here either. They have gone through five quarterbacks in total this season. They've had five different quarterbacks. Joe Flacco is their quarterback right now. And if you know anything about Joe Flacco, he is very good in the playoffs. He brings his A game to the playoffs. And I think at 38, it's very, very interesting if he can beat the Texans here, which I think they can do because I like how the Browns play. They're a very scrappy team. Kevin Stefanski of the Browns likes running his screens. He likes, beating everybody to a pulp with his defense, and it's going to be just a very nice game in general. But I think the Browns will take it, and Joe Flacco will be the NFL record holder for the most road wins in the playoffs. When we get to the Dolphins and Chiefs matchup, it's at Arrowhead, and apparently it's supposed to be like minus 30 there. And when we're looking at this, there was a stat out there where it's going to be a very cold game in Arrowhead, and the Dolphins don't like the cold. They don't win in the cold. They're like 0-10. So when that stat was posted, I was looking at that stat and going, okay, so they just jinxed the Chiefs. The Chiefs aren't gonna win, are they? Because whenever you post stats like that and go, oh, they're 0-10, oh, they're 0-10, they'll probably go 0-11 this weekend. You're just inviting them to win this game. And plus, it's a Tyreek Hill revenge game for the team that let him go this offseason. It's going to be a very interesting time for Tyreek Hill. And I think that's why the Dolphins will win out here because of the higher powered offense. I think Raheem Mostert, I think Devon Achane, and I think Tyreek Hill will have a day against the Chiefs. And I think honestly, the Chiefs have been a bit underwhelming this season, a bit surprising because they're a Super Bowl caliber team, but they have not shown that all season long. They've had a lot of issues with receiver drops. They've had a lot of issues just in general throwing the ball and not getting what they really need. So they have to use Isaiah Pacheco and things like that. And although Isaiah Pacheco is a very good running back, I don't see him being able to carry the load against a Dolphins team that's honestly injured on defense, but I think they'll still hold their own. So I'm picking them to win their wild card matchup, and I'm picking the Bills to win against the Steelers. The Steelers do not have TJ Watt, and that is their best player on defense. And their offense really hasn't been good. They've been able to scrape by and win games, but this is the playoffs, man. Anything can happen. The players on the field are, very much ready to go. They're insanely passionate because now they've made the playoffs, so they're that much closer to a Super Bowl, and they'll play a lot harder. So I think the Bills will end up taking that matchup. In the divisional round, it's going to be the Ravens versus the Dolphins, and I think the Ravens are going to take it. If you've watched any of my Seahawks game recap videos, I believe it was in week 9 when we faced the Ravens, and we got completely, utterly destroyed by the Ravens. And it's due to the fact that this Ravens team is insanely good. It's insanely balanced. There's not many weaknesses to exploit that I'm seeing throughout the Ravens' tenure through this 2023-2024 season. And honestly, I think the Dolphins do have a weakness that the Ravens could exploit, and that is literally take away Tyreek Hill and let your defense close in on the run game. Because when there's no Tyreek Hill in the game, it becomes a lot harder for Tua to be either bailed out, or it's a lot harder when you don't have your number one receiver and they're clamped. But you just gotta take away Tyreek Hill and you have a much better chance of winning this game. And that's why I think the Ravens will win, because their defense, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were first in sacks this year as a team, and they have the number 2 best player in terms of interceptions this season. I believe that was Geo Stone. So when you have a very good defense and when you have a offense that's built around Lamar Jackson, who can outduel you in a lot of different ways with his legs, with his throwing power, it's just going to be a very tough game for the Dolphins. But the next matchup is less tough, and I think it's the Bills going to take the Browns in this matchup. I think the Browns will beat the Texans, but I don't think they'll have enough unicorn magic in Joe Flacco to win against the Bills. And I think the Bills will get it together for the playoffs. I think if they can carry momentum against the Steelers, and they were carrying momentum into the playoffs because they had just won the division. They have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder because of how they got into the playoffs, but I think this will be a time for the Bills Mafia to prove themselves, and I think it'll just be too much for the Browns. AFC Championship game, it's going to be the Ravens versus the Bills, and I think the Ravens take it. I think honestly, it's this year for the Ravens. I think this team is going to be the best it's ever going to be, and if they don't make the Super Bowl this year, it's going to be a travesty, and I think that'll be a very sad thing to happen. But for the NFC, let's get to these matchups. Wild card, Eagles and Bucks, and I think the Bucks are going to lose it. I love Baker Mayfield, but the Bucks and the NFC South are just they're such an enigma sometimes. Yes, they did win their division, but it was the NFC South. So they'll always have a chip on their shoulder. And although the Eagles have hit a bit of a speed bump this year with not being able to play proper football, they've stumbled in the playoffs, and I believe since they've made it to the playoffs, they'll be really hungry and really adamant to get past the wild card and show that they're one of the best teams in the NFC, and they want to reassert that kind of stigma over the entire NFL. But next up, we got the Lions versus the Rams, and I think the Rams do take this one. The reason why I think the Rams take this one is because it's Matthew Stafford's revenge game. So he's honestly going to be playing a lot more just because it's the team that he was playing for the majority of his career. And I think honestly, this game will mean a lot to him. And I think honestly, he's going to have the weapons on not only the offense, but also the defense to win this game out for the Rams. And next up for the final wildcard matchup, we got the Cowboys versus the Packers. And honestly, I think the Packers, although they've been a thorn in the Cowboys' side for as long as they've been a franchise, I think the Cowboys get over their demons. I think now with all the narrative coming out that they can't get past the wild card, they're a first round exit team. I think with this amount of talent, Dak Prescott and company, especially on the defensive side of the ball, will come to play and try to quash that narrative. And I think the Packers will get caught up in the crossfire. And I think the Cowboys will make it to the divisional round this year. But we get to the divisional round, and it's the 49ers versus the Rams. This is easy for me. The 49ers are in the NFC West. I know what they're like. I know how they play, and they play mean. And the rest of the NFL knows how they play as well. And I think, honestly, when you're looking at the 49ers, they are insane. You put any quarterback in their system, in the Kyle Shanahan system, and they can do magic with the amount of weapons they put around Brock Purdy. You know, it's insane to bet against them at this point. And I think the Rams will have a very tough time getting past that defense, because that defense has Chase Young on it. That defense has Nick Bosa on it. That defense has, Fred Warner, who's one of the best linebackers in the game. Ward is not a bad corner at all. So I think those kind of guys, the amount of superstar talent that the 49ers have on their team, will just outlast the Rams. But for the next divisional game, it's going to be the Cowboys versus the Eagles. And the Cowboys, after squashing their nemesis in the Green Bay Packers, will beat the Eagles. And I know what you're thinking. Yeah, they're not going to have even if they do beat the Packers, they're not going to have the same luck twice. Well, in that mindset, if they beat the Packers, if they do, which I think they can very well do, the Cowboys are going to be riding on such a high after beating the Packers that they're going to feel unstoppable. And with the Eagles being a little bit sluggish and trying to get into the playoffs, I think in the NFC East, you're going to see the Cowboys take that crown and beat the Eagles to then ultimately face the 49ers in the championship game and get crushed. I think the 49ers are just too good of a team to even consider betting against them. And that's why I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. And it's going to be a Ravens and a 49ers Super Bowl, with the 49ers taking it, in my opinion. And one of the reasons for this Super Bowl matchup is, I know it's a conspiracy theory. I know it's probably not exactly true, but look at the last two Super Bowl logos and look at the winners of those dealings. Look at the logos, look at the colors that they have on the logo, and then look at who made playoffs. It was the Bengals and the Rams when they had a orange and yellow background to them. And then it was teal for the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. So, that in mind, they went to the Super Bowl. And now it is purple and red. Purple is the Ravens, red is the 49ers. And I think that's honestly what's going to happen. I think that's honestly what's going to happen. And it's going to be just so funny if that actually ends up happening. I'm going to be finding that so funny. But I can't bet against the 49ers in this one. I think they've got too powerful of a team, even for Lamar Jackson. I think with Lamar Jackson being a run style type of quarterback, the 49ers defense will be so crucial in this Super Bowl, and they'll try and contain Lamar Jackson. And I think they can do it with Chase Young and Nick Bosa on the edges, plus the rest of that team. But that's how I think the Super Bowl is going to go. And here's how I want the playoffs to play out. And this is the more unrealistic option, because I just want storylines at this point. I still think the Browns are going to beat the Texans. I think Joe Flacco will be making that kind of run. And I think honestly, still he'll be a very good uh, guy to go up against the playoffs, and I think he'll make it and really do something special. I still think the Dolphins are going to win over the Chiefs. Like I said, I think the Tyreek Hill revenge game will be electric, and I think he'll have a big day against the Chiefs. And I want the Bills to lose against the Steelers because the Steelers really fascinate me. The power run game, the amount of determination that Najee Harris, the amount of determination that Jalen Warren has is just insane to me. They love their power run on their offense, and I think it'll be really interesting for me if the Steelers without TJ Watt beat the Bills. That would be a very cool storyline for me. In the divisional, though, we've got the Ravens still beating the Steelers. I don't think they'll have magic, even if they beat the Bills. I think if they go up against the Ravens in the divisional, they'll get crushed. And I think, honestly, the Dolphins and Browns, I want to see Joe Flacco, 38 years old, go in and make the Super Bowl. And that's why I said it's unrealistic because this is probably not going to happen in the slightest, but this would be a fantastic story for a 38-year-old to go in and beat a very high-powered offense. And with all the troubles that the Browns have had over the season, having 5 different starting QBs, not having your all-star running back in Nick Chubb for the majority of the season. I believe he got injured in week 2 against the Steelers. No, I think he got injured in week 1. I can't remember exactly when he got injured, but it would be awesome if the Browns just went into the playoffs and went, let's play for Chubb, and they actually made it to the Super Bowl, beating the Ravens out in the AFC Championship game. That would be fantastic. For the NFC, again, I have the Buccaneers beating the Eagles in the wild card because I love Baker Mayfield. And honestly, Baker Mayfield's been in talks with the Bucks in getting an extension done. So him beating the Eagles in the playoffs, I think would seal that for him. And I would really love to see Baker Mayfield in a team that really appreciates him. And I want him to have a great rest of his career. And in this one, I picked the Lions to beat the Rams because I love what Dan Campbell has done with the culture. They've won the NFC North for the first time in 30 years. It's insane the amount of storylines that are going to come out of that alone has been really inspiring. And I think Dan Campbell will lead his guys to beating the Rams there. And the next one up is actually want the Packers to win over the Cowboys. I want the Cowboys to stay kind of in the doghouse because I like the Packers. As a fan of the Seahawks, you know, I do like the Packers. My uncle is a Packers fan, so I am rooting for the Packers in these playoffs because I really want them to do really well. For my uncle's sake, that would be really cool. And they took our spot in the NFC 7 seed. So if they go out in the wild card, it'll break my heart, honestly, to see them go out in the wild card. So that's why I picked them to not go out in the wild card. Next up is the divisional round, and it is the Lions versus the Buccaneers. I think the Lions take it to the conference championship because that would be an amazing story. They get into the playoffs, they win the NFC North after 30 years, and they make it all the way to the divisional round. And honestly, this is where it gets even more bombastic. The Packers win over the 49ers. They beat the boogeyman of the division. The Packers have lost the last 4 against the 49ers. The Packers have their kryptonite in the 49ers and they beat them. They finally get past them. And that leads to one of the best rivalries of all time in the NFC. For me, in the NFC North, it is the Packers versus the Lions, and I hope the Packers make it to the Super Bowl. I hope they make it to the Super Bowl, and we'll have lots of fun. And for Super Bowl champions, though, I'm going with Joe Flacco, man. If the Browns somehow make it to the Super Bowl, I hope the Browns win because it would just be so insane. No one would expect that. All social media networks, any media network out there would be on fire, and the Browns would build a statue of Joe Flacco in Cleveland. I bet you. Because if Joe Flacco wins them a Super Bowl, it'll just be an amazing story. And I would love to see that happen. But, anyways, that is my predictions for Super Bowl 58. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. And if you really did, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any future uploads to this channel, as there will be more future uploads coming because it is the off season, and this off season right now has been insanely chaotic and interesting with all the storylines, with all the coach firings and etc. So I hope you stick around for that, and I hope that next video, that is tomorrow, I will be recapping the full 2023-2024 playoffs with videos after every playoffs game that is played in playoffs this year. So stay tuned for that. If you've watched any of my Seahawks game recap videos on this channel, it's going to be basically the exact same format as those, but it's going to be a little bit different because I'll have no bias in my praising of these teams. So it'll be really fun for that kind of factor. So stay tuned for that and hit the subscribe button so that you know when those videos come out. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend as we get ready for Super Wild Card weekend and the start for the hunt for Super Bowl 58. Anyways, go Hawks, go, and I will see you hopefully in the next video. Take care.